Welcome back. This is the second video of the second class, and I showed you this graph in the previous video. This is the probability, calculated probability of head when you toss a coin. So I simulated this graph from Microsoft Excel. And so I told you, as the sample size, the number of repetitions increases, the probability of head approaches to the true probability, right? So that's obvious. But then think about this. Even when you throw a coin for 1,000 times, still the probability is not exactly zero point 0.5. Then how do we know the true probability is 50%? Actually, the probability 50% is not a statistical result. It is more about physics. So we cannot tell. To understand the true probability is to understand the true probability is 50%, you have to throw the coin like infinite number of times, which is impossible. But instead, we know that the probability of head is 50% from the assumption, physics assumption, that probability of head equals to the probability of tail. So each has to be 50%. It's more about physics or mathematics result, not statistics result. So then here comes another important concept. You have to distinguish the true probability and the truth, unknown truth, and our observations. And in statistics, the truth is called the population. It is collection of all items of interest. So, like in coin toss, the population is infinite number of results. But on the other hand, the sample is a part of the population which is observed. So sample is observed items from the population. It is data. That's data. So the distinction between population and sample is the most important concept when you conduct statistical inference. Um, and it is the easiest way to understand this is to think it as an infinite number of repetition. So the population is just an infinite number of repetitions, which is impossible. So it is unknown. So the true probability is calculated from the population or the infinite experiments. So the true probability is unknown. That's the starting point of statistics. If the population is known, or if you can do the experiment for infinite number of times, you don't need statistics. Then it is just about computation, how to compute the probability or average. So, basically, in statistics, we assume that the population is unknown, so that we have to do statistical inference. Statistical inference is about inference is to inference about the population using a sample. You can do like estimation, you can do hypothesis testing, you can calculate standard error, confidence interval. There are many inference methods, and all of them are based on this distinction. So we would like to know the population, but it is not approachable. It's not available. On the other hand, we have finite number of observations in our data. That's the sample we have. Then using the sample, can we guess the infinite world, the limit of the infinity? That's inference, and uh, it takes maybe more than a month to get to the inference chapters. And before going there, we will study more about the population. I would not distinguish population and sample for a while, but it's not a big problem until we think about inference. So you may just understand the population is an infinite number of experiments, a special, very, very special data. Okay, so I, I, we are talking about the repetition of experiments. How can we think about the repetitions? And it was important because many repetitions increases the accuracy of analysis. And second, uh, it is important to think about population as an infinitely repeated experiment case. And then also we need to think about how can we repeat experiment, the actual implication of that. Uh, the most common example in social sciences is survey. Survey is the simplest and most common experiment we can think of. Like in a survey, so for example, wage distribution, household income distribution. Household income distribution, what is random? All the income distributions are fixed. So for example, I would like to see the average of household income. Then what you're going to do, you are going to do a survey. That means you will randomly choose an individual or a household or any subject depending on your topic. Like it can be a firm or a country or a stock or financial asset, whatever. Randomly choose a person, individual, and give the individual a set of questions, a questionnaire, and let the person answer, have the person answer the questions. And their answers are our data, one point of our data. That is the basic structure of survey. So the randomness is coming from my say my income is determined. Last year income is determined. Still in the data, my income is understood as a randomness because I was chosen by a randomness. So if you choose a different person, you will see different income. So that's where the randomness is coming from. And typically, in most of the social science data, the randomness is coming from the randomization in survey. Who you choose and whether if you are lucky, or then you will choose a very rich person. If you're unlucky, then you may choose a poor person. So that is the randomness, and that's how we define the distribution of income or wages. And here I list 6 data sets that are very popular and publicly available free data. So all of them are based on survey. So panel study of income dynamics, it's about income. And current population survey, it's about basic demographics. And national longitudinal survey of youth, it's more about younger cohort and follows their life cycle. And health and retirement study, it's self-explanatory. And consumer expenditure survey, survey of consumer finances. So these data are based on survey. So in these data, the population is everyone in the United States, or like say every adult in the United States. And the population can be approached by randomly choosing individuals for infinite number of times, which is impossible. So in those data, I do not know exactly how many individuals are surveyed, but NLSY, National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, is an example data we are going to use later. And in our data, there are more than 5,000 individuals surveyed. So that's the sample size. The randomization is, so the experiment was repeated more than 5,000 times. That's that's the structure. When you read survey data, you have to understand what is the underlying experiment and what is the underlying randomness. I just explained how you understand that randomness. And another tricky problem in the definition is there are some cases clearly there is no experiment. There is no experiment that can be repeated. Like for example, the probability of rain on Labor Day is 30%. Okay, this statement has no problem. Statement itself is we use this kind of sentence a lot of times. You hear that from the news. However, what is the experiment? It does not fit into our structure. And maybe it's a little bit ad hoc and like a little bit awkward, but we try to squeeze this sentence into our structure. This is how I like how statisticians justify that. So hypothetically, you cannot repeat the experiment uh, in reality, but hypothetically, the randomness is generated by Mother Nature. And Mother Nature has a lot of weather scenarios. How the clouds move around, how the temperature goes up and down. So there are different scenarios. And then the Mother Nature chooses one scenario for Labor Day. I don't know how it was chosen, but that's its hypothetical process. And we assume that the experiment is repeated every year on Labor Day. So it is repeated every year. So if you look at the like past 20 years data, then you observe 20 observations on Labor Day. So and if you observe 100 Labor Day weather records, then you can calculate the probability. So it requires a very strange assumption, but still it's understandable. We can handle this probability within the same structure. And if you go deeper, its argument is a little bit more complicated. But let me just stop here. And by the way, these kind of data are called time series. Time series data are observations over time, and this type of data is particularly important and common in macroeconomics or financial economics, like GDP. The GDP growth rate is observed for the past like 70 years. Then that is then we have to understand it as seven experiment is repeated for 70 times. That's how we understand that. And stock returns. What is the what is the probability of stock market going up tomorrow? So that's another important probability we have to think about. But the experiment is a little bit is perfectly imaginary hypothetical experiment. So this is how we justify the experiment and that probability. Okay, thank you for listening. We so far we have defined the structure probability, and I try to explain this structure is universally applicable. So in time series data and survey data, you may understand the probability and the randomness underlying the data in this way. So I am going to talk more about more rigorous and more technical terms in the next video. Thank you.